So Doc, one of the things I'm going to do is, if we are able to get that cap tossing scene, I'm going to set it up here, and then I'll go into the speech. It is my great pleasure to present the University Liggett School Class of 2020. Suffices to say that this is likely one of the most unprecedented commencements in the 142-year history of this institution. Rather than our typical gathering in June, we find ourselves in mid-July. Rather than being all together here in this beautiful space, graduates and families have come individually to celebrate their accomplishments. Rather than speaking to a congregation of our community, I am recording these words for posterity in front of a mostly empty grove. This is certainly not what any of us planned when we gathered together at flag raising last September, full of optimism for the year ahead. In reflecting on this, I'm reminded of an old Yiddish maxim, Mensch tracht und Gott lacht. People plan and God laughs. Updated for modern times, the saying goes, life is what happens when you are busy making other plans. Yes, graduates, you had so many plans changed by the pandemic in which we find ourselves, one like our planet has not seen in more than a century. You planned a senior spring of valediction and joy. You planned final sports seasons of camaraderie and success. You planned final concerts and exhibitions of artistic excellence. You planned celebrations, prom, Ring and Founders Day, and yes, even this much postponed graduation ceremony. And yet while we planned, life happened. God laughed. But here's the thing about adversity. We aren't ultimately defined by what we lose, nor how we suffer. We are defined in the end by how we respond to loss and to suffering and to sacrifice. And you, members of the class of 2020, responded remarkably to an unprecedented situation. Each of us, headmaster, administrators, faculty members, classmates, and yes, your adoring family and friends are so proud of the way you responded. As scholars, you stayed engaged in classes despite being online and led by example. Your efforts in creating our first virtual celebration of research were particularly impressive and will influence how we approach ARP long beyond your tenure. As athletes, you took the loss of your spring seasons in stride and were there to support the underclassmen as teams got back together in June. You continued to be leaders of team cultures that will live beyond your time here on Cook Road. As artists, you continued to create and to perform, seeing the virtual format not as a challenge, but as a new muse. As budding activists, you spoke out about grave injustice in the greater world and here at school, and eloquently and bravely demanded change. As humans, you've done a remarkable job rolling with the punches, keeping up your spirits and lifting the spirits of others. I'm especially thinking of your first grade buddies. Your humanity, your community spirit, and your love for this place was even on display in your senior skip day, the first in the history of the planet where skipping school meant actually physically coming to school. Indeed, when we tell your story, and when you tell your story for years and years to come, you won't frame it in terms of what you didn't do. We'll all frame it in terms of what you did do. And yet, seniors, I am sure deep down in the quiet moments when you aren't keeping up the brave face, you can't help but feel cheated. You can't help but ask, why us? Why me? Why this year? You can't help but protest, this is not fair. You've learned at 18 or at 19 what many of us only come to realize much later. Life isn't fair. It is at best impartial, and at worst, probabilistic. Despite our best efforts, despite our greatest hopes and intentions, even if we do everything right, life will sometimes find a way of shifting the earth beneath our feet. Now, I hope and I pray that these past few months and the unpredictable months to come represent the worst unfairness you experience in your lives. If that turns out to be the case, you will have lived a good life by any measure. But in the event that's not the case, here's a few suggestions for how to survive the next outbreak, be it literal or metaphorical, of unfairness in your world. First, count your blessings. Notice what you have rather than what you don't have. To have grown up with love, to have your basic needs met, to have been able to attend a school like ours, to be off to the many wonderful places you are heading this fall, these are advantages that much of the greater world do not have. Be thankful for them. Next, share gratitude. Reflect on the people who have impacted your life, those who were responsible for those blessings and those advantages, and thank them. Start, of course, with your parents, families, friends, and teachers who supported you on your journeys here at University Liggett School. Choose optimism. Reframe challenges as opportunities. Science tells us that optimistic, positive thinking literally rewires the brain in ways that not only create more resiliency, but literally make you healthier. And finally, be kind, be generous, be empathetic, be loving. The antidote to an unfair world is fair-minded people. As you make your own way in life, do your very best to make it easier for others to make their way. As the old adage goes, you make a living by what you get, but you make a life by what you give. Horace Mann, the famous educator, put it more boldly. Be ashamed to die until you have won some victory for humanity. Knights of 2020, for 4 or 7 or 15 years, you have shown us that you have all the skills, all the humanity, all the love, not only to navigate this unfair world, but to make it a fairer place for the rest of us. We wish you Godspeed on that journey, and we know that your remarkable story, of which this pandemic is only one chapter, has only begun to be written. We love you, God bless you, and go Knights.